Maths and Innovation at London South Bank University, and also the author of Why is Construction So Backward? And he's joined by Head of Housing and Land at the New Economics Foundation, Beswick. And James, to you first of all, is construction backwards, or are they just very unlucky? This was a dreadful accident, and a lot of people's attention is now being turned at them.
Well, accidents do happen, but I think if you look at all the causes that went into the disastrous fire at Grenfell, they do really confirm how backward the construction industry is. It's dirty, it's rainy, it's low productivity. We are not mass manufacturing houses with the robots, the internet, the drones, and the new materials that we could be using. We're still back in the 19th century, and the regulatory regime surrounding housing is also very backward, very difficult to understand. So I think the industry does have to hold its hand up and say we've got to move to mass manufactured homes in large quantities with a much, much better product. We've got to build out, not just upwards with high density homes, but outwards on the green belt with gardens and with space to swing a cat. That's the kind of product we need.
Joe, would you concur with that? I mean, do you think that the system as it is currently broken?
I mean, the housing system as a whole, if anything, over the past 40 years has gone backwards. 40 years ago, we had a housing system which was developing, which provided for people of all income levels and relatively safe housing. We haven't seen a tragedy kingdom for decades, and what's happened is decades of government policy has allowed the housing system to degenerate such that we now have 1.2 million people on the waiting list for social housing, such that millions of people, 3 million people in London, are trapped in the private rented sector with incredibly high rents, very little security. Homelessness has doubled in the last 10 years, and obviously we've seen the failure of the private regulation system at Grenfell. So it's certainly the case that the housing has got worse. It needs to innovate, but politicians need to have the political will to invest with innovative policies, but also proper money to solve the problem.
What you're talking about, James, all these innovations, all these ideas, they sound great, they all sound very whizzy, but the reality of construction, as you say, it is a dirty business. It's a patch of land covered in mud that you have to erect a house from. No two sites are ever the same. It's not a factory, it's not a sterile environment. You can't just knock up houses.
No, I don't agree at all. I mean, we've just seen the National Health Service has agreed to favour companies making mass-manufactured modules for hospitals. A heart unit in Newport doesn't have to be different from a heart unit in Newcastle. And if you ask most people about houses rather than heart units, they would want a house no matter what colour it's in, as long as you can move around in it and it's got modern conveniences and so on. So it's time we moved into the 21st century. Not every plot is different. Not every need is different. We could use a whole lot more homogeneous housing with customised, internet dialed up components, you know, any colour you like, and all the rest of it, but we need to move into the 21st century. The rate of accidents in construction as it is now is way above what it is in a factory. We need those factory-built iHomes. That's what we need now.
Joe, it sounds to me awfully like what happened in the 60s and awfully like what led to high-rise housing, this idea of homogenised building. But do you think that something like that would solve the current system?
One thing that's absolutely crucial in this debate is while innovation is vital and while the construction sector certainly needs to modernise, we mustn't confuse a technical problem with a political problem. We have a broken housing system, we have record levels of homelessness, we have 1.2 million people on the waiting list for social housing because of a lack of political will over the last 40 years to really do something about it. System building, which comes in and out of favour, might play a role in that, but it's not necessarily going to produce the safe, decent, affordable housing that loads of places in this country are crying out for. So what we really need is politicians to take housing seriously, invest in housing and build housing themselves.